Frontline Messengers podcast broadcast brought to you by Hope for Humanity 2020 and HopeHouseOrlando.org. Me and Nurse Nicole are super excited tonight to bring on one of the 6 doctors that testified before Senator Johnson's hearings that all of our news agencies seem to have amnesia and forget about and don't want to talk about. But tonight we're excited to talk shit because we've got the doctor of it, Dr. Sabine Hazan. When I do lives, I would call her the Malibu doctor because she makes sure she tells you that. And I think that's awesome for what she's been doing for our community. So let's get into it. Well, thank you for tuning in tonight, everybody. Sorry we ran a little late, but that's just how things go. Me and Nurse Nicole are so excited, so excited to have you on, Dr. Sabine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, for a doctor that has a book that states this, let's talk shit, which you can get on Amazon. I figured, you know, from what we've been dealing with and what we've seen in patients, what better expert to have than Dr. Sabine? And she's from the U, baby. I love it. I love it. I love it. So thank you for coming on.
And my pleasure. My pleasure. It was crazy times during the pandemic, right? I mean, that's why I wrote the book, because I said, you know, how come we're not looking at the microbiome, right? I mean, you know, the microbiome is your immunity. Why are we not looking at the microbiome? And I wrote the book to kind of educate people on how to increase your bifidobacteria, what bifidobacteria is, you know, what bacteria is to begin with, you know, the digestive tract a little bit, talking about how the possibilities, what are antibiotics, how antibiotics, you know, are just, you know, microbes or secretions of microbes, and all these medications are either protein derived or secretions of microbes or microbes. So it was kind of like, you know, I just wanted to inform the public, because I feel like we're heading into a world, especially in pharmaceutical companies, of, you know, shit in capsules. And you know, I didn't want that world, because I thought, well, why the shit of an MIT student, and why not someone from Morocco where I'm born? You know, why not? Can we give the poop of a Mexican to a Japanese? Can we give a Japanese to Amazon woman? You know, we're all so different. We're all so diverse. We're all so unique. And I feel like that's the ultimate globalization, in my opinion.
Well, early on in this, because you know, COVID has changed the entire world. You know this. You testified before. You're dead on. And in 2020 and 2021, I've been on teams that were looking at this as a biological gain of function spike protein producing bioweapon. And we knew that it was attacking the microbiome, for what we call bioweapon 1. Before the jab came out, we are already seeing this. And I came across a YouTube video that went viral with you, but that's when I'm like, she knows exactly what the hell she's talking about. And I'm going to play it right now so we can get into a little further, because I'm just so curious. I want to ask you these questions after the video.
I said, well, you know what? Since the agenda is the vaccine, well, let's look at what the vaccine's doing in the microbiome. And that's at the same time as they started rolling these vaccines, I started enrolling doctors that basically were getting vaccinated. And I'm like, can I get your stools before and after you get vaccinated? And sure enough, people would come to me and they're like, hey, I heard you're testing the microbiome. I want to have my baseline, because just in case I change, I want to know what microbes I had before. So I'm like, yeah, happy to do it. So the first 4 patients, I started noticing a month later, the bifidobacteria, this important microbe, is dropping in patients pre and post vaccination. So then I started like asking myself, wait a minute, what's going on here? I mean, is it creating a bifidophage? You know, because this is precision medicine. This is forensics of the gut, right? You've got your microbiome this way before, and you've got it after, and it's the same patient, and only a certain group of microbes are getting killed. You got to pay attention. So then, 10, 20, 30.
How did you know to
Well,
get a before and after? How? I'm just curious.
I'll tell you how. So first of all, I'm in the clinical trial business, and I do clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. And I was doing clinical trials on vaccines, and I was doing clinical trials on biologics and on, antibiotics, etc. And so when I looked at the study of these vaccines and the animal studies in particular, I was a little bit shocked at the rapidity at which these animal studies were going. And I was also shocked at the whole narrative, right? The whole propaganda in a way, like, oh, the vaccine stays in the deltoid. Oh, have some French fries with the vaccine. All these things like, we'll pay you $100 to get a vaccine. We'll pay you $1,000. And it was like all these things. And it just didn't make sense. I mean, that's like an incentive, that's like an incentive to the patients to essentially take a product that's investigational, right? And also, if you look at the definition of the vaccine changed during the pandemic. I don't think many people understood that, right? The old definition of the vaccine is actually, a compound that is mimicking a microbe in order to create an immunity so that when you are exposed to that microbe, you do not develop an allergic reaction or a problem from the microbe, right? This was not like that. This vaccine, there was no guarantee that you were not going to get COVID. And when people started getting vaccinated and then they got COVID, I'm like, why would I put something in my body? Here I am on the front line of COVID. Here I am still standing. I've exposed myself to thousands of patients. I've not gotten sick. I'm basically, I don't understand why I need to take something when my body is like rejected it in a way. It was kind of a funny story because every time I would get exposed to someone with COVID, I would get diarrhea. It was almost like my body's like, COVID in the body, get rid of it, So I almost developed this, I don't know, immunity of rejecting. So all these questions, and then, which was the best part, was my own protocols of hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc, which I submitted to the FDA on April 2nd, or in March sometime, but it got approved like April 3rd or 4th. And my other protocol of ivermectin, doxycycline, zinc were attacked. All of a sudden, hydroxychloroquine's a bad drug. Ivermectin's a bad drug. So they attacked hydroxychloroquine by having President Trump talk about hydroxychloroquine, which we all know President Trump has a great, presence of being polarizing. He knows how to irk people on this side and he knows how to stimulate people on this side, but they're still talking about him. So this was the perfect person to put talking about hydroxychloroquine because it totally divided the drug. It put the drug in the limelight and it killed the drug, unfortunately, and it certainly killed my research. Fast forward to July, me and Dr. Barodi presented the ivermectin, doxycycline, zinc protocol, and that protocol got killed, right? So remember, if a protocol came out that there was treatment, then there would be no vaccines allowed, because if treatment was allowed, there was no vaccine allowed, okay? So when that happened and both hydroxy was killed and ivermectin was killed, I said to myself, well, you know what? Let me look at the microbiome and the vaccine. Let me look at this amazing vaccine that's supposed to be the solution for everyone. When I saw my first patient, and literally it was kind of funny because I was such a skeptic of this vaccine from all the lies to begin with. And also, not a fan. I've worked with a lot of pharmaceutical companies in the past. I wouldn't say Pfizer is like that legit. They've been fined for millions of dollars for shady stuff they've done. So, I've I had my radar on, let's put it that way. So I wanted to see, and of course, nobody's investing in this, right? And so I said, you know what? Let me see it. What good is money if I'm dead? What good of money is if I'm wrong? But if I don't look, I'm never gonna know, right? And the first 4 patients, the bifidobacteria was really high and then dropped, by half or zero. And that's when I started paying attention. I started saying, wait, what's going on? And here's the other crazy thing. At the same time, remember there was a little girl that was paraplegic, that basically was wheelchair bound?
If they come on and they
Maddie, yep.
Yes. And I got her stool sample, and I had her brother's stool sample.
Yes.
And her stool sample had 0 bifidobacteria. Her brother had bifidobacteria. He got the placebo. She got the real stuff. Then I had another physician friend of mine who came to me, who's a gastroenterologist in Beverly Hills. She was the top gastroenterologist in Beverly Hills. And she comes to me totally debilitated after the vaccines. She had 0 bifidobacteria in her gut. So what happened was and we did a podcast together, and I started saying, wait, let me see more vaccine injured. Let me get out there. Let me talk about this. Let me be the voice, right? And I wasn't there to kill the vaccine. I wasn't there to say, look, I know what was done, okay? And I'm not going to go in that rabbit hole of, conspiracy theory and all that. I'm going to go with the rabbit hole of humans are obsessed with money. And humans do not see clearly when they see the price of their stock going up. When you're investing $15,000 in the stock market on Pfizer or Moderna, you can't see that people are dying from the vaccine,
Right.
because all you're seeing is that price of that stock going up. Therefore, you're biased. If you're biased, you cannot see clearly. Same thing with all these scientists and these patents that were created for, the virus and the manipulations. What people don't realize is that you cannot trademark or patent a microbe. A natural microbe, you cannot patent it. Therefore, it cannot be a business. So I can discover a new microbe, but it doesn't matter. It's a free for all. Anybody can use it. I cannot patent or trademark it. But I can manipulate a microbe. I can CRISPR a piece of the microbe, add another piece in it, and now I've got a business. Now I've got a trademark, I've got a patent, and I can make a business out of it. And now I can license my patent to pharmaceutical companies and create vaccines out of that, right?
Yeah.
All good in the sense of, hey, everybody wants to make a buck here and there, right? It's not good when you're messing up making a buck with science, and you're messing up making a buck with all of humanity, and you're vaccinating all of humanity with very poor research, and you're not paying attention to the people that died or the people that are sick.
Yes.
And that's a big mistake in research. So I have no problem. It's a free-for-all country. Go for it. Make a business, whatever. But don't come and give your business and sell it to everybody around the world and force everybody, because some of us that have a critical mind are in tune with what happened. And you cannot sell me swampland in Africa, because I'm going to know it's a swamp. Now, it may be good for the microbiome, but I'm not going to buy it, because it's going to take me years to replant and regrow vegetables there. So, at the end of the day, that's literally what happened. It was corrupt scientists, people that are arrogant. It was arrogance beyond, to think that, hey, we can manipulate the virus and we can spike it, and then we can figure out the spike and give the spike to people. They didn't really think about what happens when can that spike activate other viruses in the gut? Because I can assure you that as much as there's bacteria in your microbiome, in your gut, in your poop, there's also viruses. And so those viruses, could they be activated by a spike? Possibly. Nobody's looked at that. Oh, I've lost.
You're on mute, Dan.
Pfizer's seen it. And they wanted to hide the trials for 65 years until a group had to sue them to get those released. And boy, was there a ton of good stuff in there that could have saved millions of lives. But, we had to fight for it. I'm a former pharma guy, former pharma manager. And we had two products that competed against Pfizer. And I called them the evil empire back in September of 2020. I did a whole episode exposing them because they crushed us like a bug, because we had two products that were clean, no adverse effects, and was competing directly with what they had. So I know.
And by the way, let me just tell you, I've been in the business as well for 3 decades, and I've seen these amazing drugs come out from ideas of doctors. I had a great drug for eosinophilic esophagitis. They crashed the stock. The drug never made it to market. I had another great drug for pancreatic cancer that we were using. And again, they crashed the stock and the company never got investors and it just disappeared. So, unfortunately, I've seen, and it's funny because they say, well, who's doing this? There's a group of people that are playing the stock market. And you and I, Dan, have seen this because this is what they do. They control pharma, they control the CRO, they control the media that tells the narrative, they pay the media, they pay the politicians, they pay both sides of the politics, they pay the lobbyists, okay? And then what happens is their drug becomes the drug, right? And then they don't want anybody to mess up with that stock because that stock is making $100 or $400 per stock, right? So anybody that comes that could be a potential threat for that stock, they will destroy. And they will destroy because there's a structure, and I've learned this during the pandemic, really. There's a structure that controls the media, that pays the media, that controls the journals, the medical journals. And they basically go to the medical journals and they say, hey, this paper needs to be retracted. And they convince the editor, not the peer reviewers, because the peer reviewers are never told anything. They convince the editor or the secretary at the journal to retract the paper because it conflicts with the narrative that pharma of that stock.
No, 1,000%. And if you follow, a crime scene, you follow the money. If you want to find the perpetrators, right? And Congress and Senate in 2020, $276 million in stock trades. 2021, and they outperformed the S&P 500, by the way. 2021, 15 million in trades. But we didn't learn because last year they did $676 million in trades. Now, what does a congressman and senator make on yearly budget? They don't make a lot of money. So, man, they must be just Nostradamuses and absolute gurus. And you got a chance to be next to somebody that got drilled quite hard because they work with Big Pharma. And we know the scheme when you testified for Senator Johnson. When you testified, what's your goal, Sabine? What are you trying to do with our population? If I could give you one question, what would you like to see happen? Because I know you care and you have nothing to gain by speaking how you're speaking.
In fact, I've lost so much. It's incredible. I mean, I was in the clinical trial business. I was making money from doing these clinical trials for pharma, so I've lost all that. Frankly, I can't even go back. After the pandemic, I'm like, I'm done. I mean, I was in the clinical trial world because I felt I made a difference. And yes, I made a difference with some drugs were safe and came to market when we're good. But when there's a new drug that comes along that's better than the old one, we cannot stop that new kid on the block that's coming and saying, hey, I could be better than biologics. I could be better at healing cancer than chemotherapy, right? I mean, we have to do better for our patients. So my goal is really to kind of unite humanity to understand that we're all going to be patients and that what we're doing that changes healthcare, that plays the stock, that plays, the narrative affects us, okay? When we interfere with research, and I think I posted it today on Twitter, or X rather, I'm sorry, I'm still like on the old name. I posted it today because essentially, what happens when you become the patient? We're all going to be patients. Who are you going to go to? The guy that was the investor that retracted papers that was the truth? I mean, really? And so none of us have the right answers. I think, even me, I'm coming out with data on autism and improvement of autism in two twins with autism where we improved their bifidobacteria and they started verbalizing. But that doesn't mean I can reproduce that in other two twins. There's a lot to learn. But here's the thing, if I can't publish that first case report of those two twins, nobody else is going to reproduce to figure out why can't we reproduce this data, right? And so who is impacted by this? The kids. Who is impacted by this? Humanity, because humans are going to need kids later. So right now we have 1 in 12 boys with autism in California. What is it going to be in 100 years? 1 in 1? And do you think we're only in California? California is the beginning. It's the beginning of the hurricane that's going to hit the rest of the world because we've globalized the world. When you look at Kiribati and they're eating the same junk food that we are eating in America, and now they have diabetes and obesity, and they're not growing their vegetables and their fruits, and they're dying in their 50s, we have a problem. When you look at, India that has increased rate of Parkinson's and autism, same as America, we have a problem. When you look at Australia that was eating fish at a gas station 25 years ago. I remember going to a gas station and they were grilling fish. Now they're eating fish and chips, and they have Costco at every corner, and the population is getting morbidly obese. What are we doing? We're killing humanity slowly, slowly. And by the way, yes, robots are coming in. Are we killing humanity to bring on the robots? Is that the future that we're going to be living? I can assure you that killing is not the answer. And the worst part of interfering with research is eventually you become the patient. We were talking about the stockbrokers, right? And the venture capitalists and all that. Do you know how many venture capitalists I have that got vaccine injured? And they're begging me to do fecal transplant on them. And you know what I tell them? I say, instead of buying that stock in Pfizer or Moderna, you should have invested in research of the microbiome. Because guess what? I don't know. I don't know, who's your donor? Who am I going to pick as your donor? Am I going to invest $300,000 to submit an IND on a poop that I believe might be the poop? And then what? Crank up that stock market to say, oh my God, poop is the cure. And then come crashing and saying, oh my God, poop wasn't the cure, it killed. So I think we need to keep research legit. Why did I do, Senator Johnson's, and why do I keep doing Senator Johnson's hearing? Because I really feel that Senator Johnson is a good man. He reached out to me during the pandemic asking about my protocols. He said to me, Dr. Hazan, I want to know the truth. I'm ready to die for the truth. And I really believed him. And I'm a good judge of character. I mean, I've seen thousands and thousands of patients in my life. So I would think that I'm a good judge of character. I believed him. And I also appreciated the fact that he gave me a stage to talk about my research, to talk about the corruption that's existing, to talk about the fact that papers are being retracted. Because when a hypothesis is retracted and you can't make a hypothesis, you've lost science. When you're trying to show that you lost no one during the pandemic and that, your sickest patients that were hypoxic survived on multi-drug therapy that included ivermectin in there, and that could have saved millions of people, and that paper gets retracted, we have a problem. And by the way, it's costing me, I have a scientist, full-time scientist that I'm paying to just go after these people that are hired to play the stock and retracting my papers. It's a full-time job. They're constantly harassing us, constantly harassing the journals. It's not the way it should be. So my end goal, I don't think it's a one sentence. My end goal is to wake up humanity to say, hey, we're going extinct. The microbiome of humanity is going extinct. We're losing bifidobacteria. Out of 4,000 sample, less than 5% have bifidobacteria in them. And loss of bifidobacteria is linked with autism, Lyme disease, Crohn's disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, long COVID, vaccine injured. We got to pay attention. We got to pay attention to what we're doing. And by the way, you see it, if it may be a small case report, but you see it with autism. And that was the miracle during the pandemic. By the way, the other path of mine is really to wake up people that we're all going to die, but there is a God. And God is still in charge, and God has a time. And if God decides, you know what, humanity is done and we're done with planet Earth and we're moving on to another planet, well, then be it. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, if humanity doesn't shape up, we're going extinct. And so, you know, that's my wake up call. It was my wake up call when I see the microbiome of people in Africa that have a more diverse microbiome than Americans. It was my wake up call when I saw autism. Kids with autism have zero bifidobacteria. And then it was my wake up call when I saw the messenger RNA vaccine killed the bifidobacteria. And it was my wake up call when I restored the bifidobacteria in 2 twins, and these 2 twins spoke. So, you know, there's something to this, right? And there's something to this bifidobacteria. It wouldn't be $1 trillion industry of probiotics if there was nothing to it, right? And interestingly enough, you're selling these probiotics, you're calling them probiotics. Why aren't you calling them bifidobacteria, you know, microbes to support your gut, because you've killed the bifidobacteria with all these, you know, antibiotics. So I think suppression of science is a big problem. I think, you know, my job is to make everyone realize that we're all different, we're all unique, but we all join together to make humanity, to continue working the planet, to continue to understand where did we come from? Where are we going? You know, are we dying? Where do we go? Where does the soul go? Where does, you know, the body go? What happens to these microbes? What do they do? Where do they come from? You know, so much to learn, you know, from, you know, let's look at the Egyptian mummies and see what microbes they had. Let's look at the Amazon. Let's preserve the microbiome of humanity, the diversity of the microbiome of humanity. I get so enraged with you know, and I think during the pandemic, I lost my mind with the whole political agenda, the whole religious agenda, the whole, you know, race agenda. My God, people, like, we're all freaking children of God.
Right.
You know, unite, you know, kiss and make up. You're all children of God. Stop the fight. Your children are suffering. You're suffering. You're lacking microbes. Go seek help. You know what I mean? You know, enough with just, you know, putting blinders on and just continuing living just to make money and going to work. Like, stop and say, what am I doing? What am I doing in this world? What am I doing in this life? You know, none of it matters. When you're young, you're not taking it with you.
It's such a good point that you make, but something that I'm glad that you're highlighting, because a lot of times people are not looking at the big picture. And as a nurse who's worked in the acute care setting for over 20 years, I have watched before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after. I took care of heart transplant patients. I still work in the hospital. You know, it's profit over patient. We have society that does not trust medicine. They don't feel that they are being heard, that they are being seen. I work a lot with the vaccine injured, like Dan does, and there's a lot of information that's not being looked at, purposely not being studied. Individuals that are hurting and that are no longer with us. And this is so important that people understand it's not going away, it's getting worse. Yes. And we're starting to see it rear its ugly head. People that have not even had a vaccine since 2021 has spiked that they're still producing years later in the high, you know, critical ranges. And understanding that a lot of patients that we're seeing are not only in the hospital for a rise in heart attacks, a rise in strokes, but what Dan and I also have talked about numerous times is sepsis. Patients that are not able to fight infection, and most likely related to the gut not being in a healthy state.
Bacteria, 100%.
Because it's gone and they're more immunocompromised.
Yes. And when you hear of young people dying of, sepsis and bacterial meningitis, you have to ask the question, did they kill their bifidobacteria? How did they kill their bifidobacteria? Did they get COVID? Did they get COVID? Did they get the vaccine? What's going on there? And unfortunately, and I'm going to bring it back to, this was a manipulated virus, and unfortunately that manipulation is affecting all of us. Okay, this was ridiculous beyond. We should not be playing with microbes. We should not be mixing microbes together. This is like the death of humanity. And if you think you can save some, no, you can't save some. You either kill everyone or no one's staying alive. I'm telling you. I mean, this is, I worry about what we've done. I really worry about it because it's coming down and it's affecting more people. It's affecting the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. I worry about this manipulation and these continuous manipulations,
Right.
Eventually, look, the people behind all that, are going to be sick. Their kids are going to be sick. And then they're going to say, oh, I shouldn't have done this. I couldn't, it's a horrible way to live when you face your demons.
Right.
I'm happy to say that, when that time comes for me, I know I've done the right thing. So when you say in one sentence, why did you do all this? Because it was the right thing to do.
Right.
That's it. You see a person suffering, you don't just watch that person and laugh. You help that person. And as hard as it is to take care of people sometimes, because let me tell you, everybody's different. Everybody has a different personality. Everybody has different angers, different past, different microbiomes, right? So they're not necessarily compatible to you. I always joke and say, some people love me, some people hate me. So you can't really fix everyone. And everybody has a time clock where it's time to let go, right? But we're not God. We're not here to put judgment. We're here to try and help.
Right.
And that was the right thing to do. That's it. I mean, I think there's people in this planet that know right from wrong. And there are people in this planet that know what's wrong, but they still they get excited about doing something wrong and they got away with it,
Right.
And that's the two populations that we're dealing with. The people that really feel the guilt about, oh my God, I've done something wrong, or this is the right way to do things. And then the people that are getting, that are laughing about the fact that they cheated someone, like, oh my God, I got $100 because I didn't pay that person. I'm so excited because I got $100, right? But then they don't see you cheated another person of $100,
Right.
and he depended on his family, and he's not feeding his family that night, right? So
Right.
that was wrong. Why are you making fun of that, right? But I tend to think those people in that section here are lacking microbes, because otherwise they wouldn't be laughing.
Well, here I seen this slide today to follow up with her question, and it says Quest Diagnostic Studies uncovers widespread community reservoirs of deadly gut bacteria. Well, I immediately thought of you. I wonder why. Now, why would I think about you with that headline?
Bifidobacteria, save the biff.
Save the biff.
Well, because kind of break it down a little bit more.
Yeah. So what happens to the microbiome is very simple. What happens to a human? You have good bacteria and bad bacteria. You kill off the bad, you don't have a defense for the bad. You kill off the good, you don't have a defense for the bad. So essentially, the bad are going to start creating problems, urinary tract infections, sepsis, meningitis. The key is to rebuild the good. That's it.
And that's any good integrative doc should be one of their key things. What happens also to the brain, because the gut's called the second brain? What happens to the brain once those bacteria, the good ones, are gone? They start getting what type of known neurocognitive disorders?
Oh, all sorts. I mean, you've got MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS. So you affect the microbiome. You start, seeing, microbes that are basically secreting toxins and going to the brains and causing all these conditions. I mean, that's definitely the research we're pushing. That's what we're, kind of, exploring. And I think that's going to be an exciting time in the future if we're allowed to publish, if we're not, stopped, and if we're not, divided. And it's crazy. So.
Does it also increase risk of cancers?
Well, we noticed that loss of bifidobacteria is linked to invasive cancer. So that's what I noticed. And so when you look at the vaccines, when you look at COVID being, you have this correlation with the vaccine killing the bifidobacteria, you have this correlation of the virus killing the bifidobacteria. And then you've got the correlation of the cancer, being killed with, so that there's an immunity problem in cancer patients. So I think it's kind of, that's how I look at it. Others have looked at it, Kevin McKernan has looked at, the contamination of the virus, of the vaccine, possibly, causing cancer. Also, the spike protein in these pathologies that he picked up on, that's not normal, right? So, and then, of course, Wafik El-Dari, talking about the alteration of the P53, etc. So I think there's definitely, we have to look at it. We have to look at it. And unfortunately, what's happening is there's too much of an arrogance that occurs in medicine, and people don't want to look at it because they're so sure that the vaccine is safe. They're so sure. They don't want to go against the vaccine because, oh my God, pharma is going to come and kill me because I'm speaking against the vaccine. I mean, like, I've brought vaccines to the market. Do a good research. Show me that it works and I don't get COVID. I'm all for the vaccine. Show me it doesn't kill anyone. I'm all for the vaccine. But the moment you censor the research, you gaslight patients that have been suffering from this vaccine. The moment that you stop other people from talking, is the moment you've lost me. I can't support that. And the moment that you get COVID, after you've gotten vaccinated. I mean, come on. The reality is, this vaccine didn't do what it was supposed to do. So,
and that's where people have lost trust. And I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because a lot of people will say, it's not that I'm necessarily anti-vax. It's the fact that it's not studied. There's no transparency. We're not even looking, and people don't even have the opportunity to have a unbiased, placebo study, etc. And so, which brings me to a part of the hearing that I think is very powerful that you brought up, and you're kind of touching on it, but I was hoping you can kind of address it head on, that most people probably have no clue happens. You made a comment during the hearing that non-medical professionals are making decisions on what data or the trials are moving forward. And how does that make sense when individuals who have no medical background are able to have such an influence in these decisions, and that the layperson may not understand that this is part of a process that actually dictates what information gets out there and eventually comes to us so that we can provide good informed consent if it does instead move forward, which a lot of times during the pandemic and beyond, as a nurse, I could not give informed consent because it didn't exist in its entirety because we never looked at it to move it forward. So would you be able to elaborate a little bit on that, about the non-medical professional part of that not being?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will tell you just from my own experience, the people that criticized my papers and retracted my papers one of them was a PhD, the other one was an investor. And none of them were gastroenterologists. There was no GI doctor, not even an MD criticizing my papers, right? So it's a whole network of people that are non-medical that are skewing the data, removing the data, censoring the data. Look, when this happened, it woke me up, right? It woke me up that I couldn't trust medicine anymore. It woke me up. And if I woke up, there's 100,000 other doctors that woke up as well. And slowly, people are waking up. My own pathologist, who was like, straight, square, like, the vaccine, etc., and following all that, he woke up. He's like, oh my God. I mean, I was doing great on my vitamins, and, I got the shot, and, he he just didn't believe in it, as he saw the corruption. It woke him up. And so I think, I come from a family of all doctors. We're like 9 doctors in the family. So, if it woke me up, it woke them up, right? And then it woke others up, right? So I think that's the hard part. The other hard part that I saw during the pandemic was, here I was treating thousands of patients, losing no one. And nobody even bothered to ask me, what am I doing? Right? I mean, the other side is pushing this vaccine. Why didn't Anthony Fauci call me and say, hey, Dr. Hazan, how are you surviving? And what are you doing to treat these people? Nobody came to ask those questions. And instead, if you'll remember, we were listening to Dr. Jha, who basically, to the best of my knowledge, has not treated patients with COVID or even touched a patient with COVID, but he was quoting all these papers.
Correct.
And so my big problem was, why are we listening to the guys who have never touched a patient? Like, go to the hospital, touch a patient,
right,
expose yourself to COVID, have a patient cough on your face multiple times a day, survive COVID, survive the patient, then come and talk to me about treatment doesn't work. But the moment they started saying, well, treatment doesn't work, I'm like, who's saying treatment doesn't work? I'm treating. I'm trying to save a life. I've treated thousands. No one died on my shift. Doesn't anybody want to know, what did I do? How did I, categorize this population to treat this way, this population to treat this way? Doesn't anybody want to know what I learned about the microbiome? I mean, I've analyzed 300 stool samples of myself. Doesn't anybody want to know the data? I mean, right now it's in my brain, but guess what? If I could publish, I would, but I'm not saying it until I can publish. So this is my ultimatum. I'm in an interesting position right now where I could say I'm kind of like Noah, right? With the ark. I could live on my ark with microbes 2 by 2 and do nothing. Or I could share and save humanity. But here's the thing. If humanity doesn't want it and is suppressing science and is suppressing the research, I'm not going to say it. I don't need to save humanity. I'm dead no matter what, right? We're all going to die. So what does it matter at the end of the day? What matters is what you do for the next person, for the next 100 years, for my grandchildren, my kids, So I think, in life, we have to stop and say, wait a minute, it's not all about money. Like I said, we're not taking it with us.
right.
So, we have to pay attention. I'm from the clinical trial world. You're going to tell me that I can't give an informed consent? You're going to tell me that I have to ignore a patient that died? I mean, I was trained. ICH-GCP guidelines trained me. The FDA trained me, looked at stuff in my charts to make sure I gave informed consent,
Right.
and that I made sure that I reported all serious adverse events. The moment we are removing the serious adverse events and we are not talking about the little boy that died a week after the vaccine is the moment that we've lost science and medicine. And frankly, we shouldn't be selling any more drugs if that happens. Okay?
Exactly.
So I have a follow-up.
Shut it down if they're not going to do it the right way. Okay? FDA should not be, if FDA wants to do their job, they need to crack that down. Okay? Because at the end of the day, it's great that you come in my office and tell me that I forgot to submit a form to the IRB on time, but you also have to call a spade. And when a serious adverse event is not reported by pharma, you need to call them out, okay?
Exactly.
Otherwise, don't bring out drugs to market. And here's the other thing. I've done over, 300 clinical trials. Are you going to tell me I can't do research now, but yet you've passed all these drugs that I've put to market from clinical trials? I mean, come on. Then if I'm not good enough to do research, go back to all my clinical trials, remove all these drugs, remove Remicade, remove Repatha, the drug from Amgen that drops cholesterol, remove all these drugs, because guess what? I was a top recruiter in all these drugs. So, I did it the right way. I did the research the proper way by informed consent, by telling the patients the adverse events, and by reporting serious adverse events and adverse events. And that's why I stayed doing clinical trial. It wasn't for the money, it was to help my patients with the next best drug. But when the next best drug and the next best research is the microbiome, and you're suffocating it and you're censoring it, then it's no go. We're done.
Right.
You worked in the hearings. You spoke about the NIS that you were working with during the
National
time.
Institute of Standard, yes.
Break that down a little bit for the audience to understand what they do.
So at the beginning of the pandemic, so before the pandemic, I was involved in, I started, because I was starting to look at the microbiome, I basically created this biome squad. The biome squad is a league of doctors that are doing, most of them are doing fecal transplant, the process of taking stools from a healthy donor, putting it in an unhealthy with C. diff. And so, I brought these doctors to a meeting to talk about the results, to talk, Sahil Khanna was talking about chronic urinary tract infections, improvement. Colleen Kelly was talking about alopecia areata, 2 cases improved with fecal transplant. So we all kind of came on these meetings mainly to understand the microbiome, because if Colleen could grow hair in 2 patients with alopecia areata, another doctor somewhere else did the research, couldn't grow the hair. So to me, there was a component of donor specific per disease. And that's what I started. I started the Biome Squad to bring all these doctors. One of the doctors was Dr. Scott Jackson at the National Institute of Standard, who basically was heading the microbiome research. And then another doctor was actually Howard Young, who was in the microbiome space at the NIH. And so they were on my board, they were on my squad rather, and they were, coming to the meetings to speak. And Howard Young was the moderator that basically allowed us, gave us a time, etc. So during the beginning of the pandemic, I was in the meeting was the first meeting of the Malibu microbiome meeting was supposed to be in March. And what happened was the pandemic occurred. So we had to cancel the meeting. But we all kept in touch as doctors and scientists, and Scott Jackson. So the National Institute of Standard, because I gave a lecture there, and as I was told, overlooks DARPA, Department of Defense, FDA. So essentially, they're the validators, right? So if the Department of Defense comes up with a microbe, that they found in Africa, for example, the National Institute of Standards validates, like makes sure that it's validated, that it's reproducible, that it's essentially legit, right? So what a privilege it was and is to have had Scott with me, because he really was, a part of the microbiome research. And so it was very important for me. And he's very much a skeptic, as I am. We're both very, critical. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I was facing going back to work to save lives. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit scared, the marketing, the PR, it was kind of scary. I'm bringing home a virus. I could be giving it to my kids. I could be killing my kids. I could be killing myself, etc. So it was kind of crazy. I talked to Scott, I talked to Howard, and Howard gave me some insight into some of the drugs that they were using. And Scott gave me confidence, because he said, well, the bubonic plague, not everybody died, right? And so he gave me that confidence to kind of go out there. And I sent him a paper where they did a PCR test of the stools, and they found COVID by PCR. And I said, I bet you COVID's in the stools. So my team started looking at COVID in the first stool samples clinically, and we found the whole genome sequence of COVID, which was really funny, because my scientist was like, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're not going to find anything. And I'm like, well, if I don't look, I'm not going to find anything. And at the same time, Scott and his team started looking at septic tanks. So he was looking at septic tanks. I was looking at patients and their symptomatology, right? Like, what does a severe patient look like? Do they have COVID? What does their microbiome look like? So I was in an interesting position, owning a genetic sequencing lab, having a portal with the FDA. Look, when I saw hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc destroyed the virus in the stools, because I saw the virus at the beginning, and then day 5, it disappeared. I started saying this is the answer, right? But then what happened was I discovered that hydroxychloroquine also kills the microbiome. And that's when I said, well, maybe that's not the answer for everybody. And then the discovery of ivermectin increases the bifidobacteria within 24 hours and also increased the oxygen saturation in my patients, small group of patients. But it was still research, right? It was the beginning for me. It was, well, maybe, but is ivermectin getting rid of the virus? Not necessarily in everyone, right? And then, and this is all data that I wish I had published, because then it would have given bigger insight on how to cure this, how to get rid of COVID, for everybody. So it's just a shame that we didn't get to publish a lot of the data, and we weren't sponsored. And, it was all, figuring out how do I bring money to pay for the research, oh, well, let me create clean vitamins, and let me sell them so that basically we get money and foundation money. And let me create a foundation so we can get money from people that I've helped to pass forward to help others, right? So I think that's really how I kind of did it, to survive, to do this, to push forward. But, I wish I had a lot of funds, etc., because it would go a lot faster. We would hire a team of lawyers that could fight the corruption, fight the retractions, hire a team of scientists to write all this data. This is data that needs to be written, but I'm only one person. And, I stepped into the pandemic wanting to do the clinical trials on hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc versus vitamin C, D, and zinc, and then ivermectin, doxy, zinc versus placebo. I did it. I did it on funds, that we raised a little bit, and then I had mostly mine. And I just wish I had finished those studies. I have some data, but unfortunately I cannot publish the data. But the one thing that I learned is that we're all individuals, and some of us have a resilience in our microbiome that allows us to survive, and some don't. And so I think, to me, that was the big lesson,
So in 21, we testified, 2,700 of us, before the Congress and Senate in the long COVID realm. And we told them 36 million Americans were suffering this, and left untreated within the decade, it could possibly collapse the health system. This is before the jabs were even known to do all the things, at the tune of $4 to $5 trillion. Well, we did the research, we doged the numbers. In 2019, our healthcare cost was $3.6 trillion here in America. Right now, it's 5.6 trillion to 5.8 trillion. So $2 trillion plus increase over the last 5 years per year. And I shared this too in October of 2020, showing the AIDS memorial quilt and comparing this to what we were dealing with in the 1980s.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we were wrong, because the numbers right now, by 1986, there was 1.5 to 2 million Americans that were suffering HIV. So if we're going apples to apples, 1980, 1986, 1.5 to 2 million Americans. Right now, we're currently looking at 52 to 54 million Americans that are suffering some form of this chronic illness crisis. Right. So it's a 10x to 100x, because outside of America, it's 100 million to 400 million that's confirmed. So you're not overstretching when you're speaking the way you're speaking,
right?
And especially,
and also, Dan, let me tell you, knowing what I know of the microbiome and how hard it is to grow those bifidobacteria, this is why people are suffering. This is why people are suffering, because here's the problem. You may think like you're taking some vitamins and it's improving your bifidobacteria, but then what happens is you're drinking something that kills your bifidobacteria. You're eating a piece of meat that's killing your bifidobacteria. You're swimming in a pool that's killing your bifidobacteria. You're using cleaning products that's killing your bifidobacteria. You just stepped out and you got sprayed, and you're killing your bifidobacteria. It is not easy to grow what has been killed in an environment that is dead, okay? And this is the big crisis that I see right now. Even us, okay, we're dodging the bullet, okay? Because you're gonna drink something, you're gonna eat something that's gonna get you back to zero, Okay.
Right.
And that's the complexity of regrowing microbes. Okay. So think about what I do in my world. Okay. I I've done research to look at all the things that, some things that kill the bifidobacteria. I don't know all the things. I'm trying to keep doing more and more to see, well, what about this? What about this? Think about what I did with the yogurt studies, where I took like 26 products over the market in Malibu and basically tested to see, they all had bifidobacteria on the back of it, and tested all of them, only to find out that 3 out of 26 had actually bifidobacteria in there. So the labels are misleading the consumer. But worse is, there was one yogurt that actually had a bacteria that causes vomiting and diarrhea. So the poor guy is eating this and he's getting vomiting and diarrhea. He's already starting the process of killing his gut. So it's, if we don't do this research, if we don't stop what we're doing and step back and say, okay, how do we grow this? And know what I've learned during the pandemic, right? We're never going to survive. We're all heading that route. And this is, again, bring me back to Noah's Ark. Do I let humanity die and build my ark? Because the way I stand is, humanity is corrupt. We need angels. We need people that are coming and saying, no, we want to save humanity. It's not about my life. I don't care. I'll be dead in like 20, 30 years, maybe 10 years, maybe tomorrow. Who cares? But guess what? What am I leaving behind for my kids? What are you leaving behind for your kids? What are you leaving behind
Amen.
for the generations? And even if you don't have kids, you should have if there's a way of coming back, well, you've just killed humanity. What are you going to come back as?
Well, we always say when God calls, we answer. And that's just it. You've made a very valid point that I think people need to hear, that it takes bravery. You have to be willing to stand up, even if you're alone in difficult situations, and speak up, because you know it's the right thing to do. And a lot of people during the pandemic were controlled by fear, and they decided to choose differently. And where I'm not judging that, I do think that there's a lot to learn from that, but also individuals like us who took a different stand, and put ourselves out there to basically take the hits. And like Dan and I always say, we were on the battlefield. It just was a different type of war. And we fought with others to try to get truth out and try to make people understand that we're losing humanity by allowing these things to happen, because you're not questioning. You're not raising the alarm to say, hey, in science, medicine is not a one size fits all. We're okay to question the science. And when they told us we couldn't do that, as nurses, when we came forward and we were gaslit and we were bullied, and I had death threats because I questioned the vaccine at the time, it was absolutely insane. And I stood out like a sore thumb. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's like, what is the right thing? And I can lay my head at night knowing that my patients were loved, they were cared for, and that I did whatever I could to provide the best care in very scary circumstances. And like you said, we are not moving in the direction, and I hate to say, conspiracies, but it's almost like, why is that? Why are they not wanting, as far as we are into this, to put the effort, to put the education, to put the funding? Billions of dollars was given out during COVID that ended up being used inappropriately by states for infrastructure. Well, they could have given it for research. They could have done things to identify.
Fixing our kids with autism? Why are we not
Yes.
doing to look at that? Why are we not spending the money? 1 in 12 boys in California is autistic. What is it going to be? 1 in 1? Why are we not starting right now to look at autism? Why are we not starting right now to look at the microbiome properly with, unbiased eyes? I think
It's ego. I think a lot of it's ego. People have to admit that there's a problem, right?
I saw the arrogance. I saw the ego during the pandemic. People that are, on both sides, and
Of course.
at the end of the day, I was probably the first one to say, I don't know. I'm willing to try. Look, the hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pack, vitamin C, D, and zinc was my patent, right? And I could have easily sold it for 10 million. I could have easily, but I didn't feel it was the right one. Something in my gut told me, do the research first, see the data. And then when I saw it killed the bifidobacteria, I'm like, well, it's just as bad as the vaccine, frankly. Right. So I'm not going to promote that, even though I spent like hundreds of thousands on a patent. So I think it takes that kind of righteousness, frankly. And those are the people that I want to see in leadership.
Amen.
And here's the thing: fear only happened to those that didn't believe in God.
Amen.
Because the reality is, the people that followed me, the people that were praying for me, they all believed in God. They weren't fearful. They were like, I'm not taking this shot. I'm going to survive, and God has me. And listen, at some point, God takes us and keeps us and does whatever. We don't understand the plan. We're just mere mortals. But I will tell you one thing. To me, this whole path has been divine intervention. Yes. From surviving the whole pandemic, from losing no one during the pandemic, from discovering bifidobacteria, from seeing a patient with Alzheimer's that was pre-pandemic, where I had a patient with Alzheimer's improve with fecal transplant and remembered his daughter's date of birth. But seeing other Alzheimer's patients that I manipulated the gut improve, at research level. I'm not saying anything, making any, claims, because, the FDA goes crazy with claims. But, I saw something. I saw 2 kids. I published the data, 2 twins improve with improving bifidobacteria. They improved their autism and spoke. To me, those were the miracles. This was God saying, hey, humanity, look here at the microbiome, because this is the miracle. What's crazy is I was involved with the hydroxychloroquine and the ivermectin trial. And hydroxychloroquine became the most popular drug ever. Ivermectin became the second most popular drug ever. And now the microbiome is hot. I think, if anything, I'm going to be the PR girl for, I think, ultimately it's about believing in God, believing that there's bigger. I had an epiphany the other day, because I treat a lot of anxiety patients, and sometimes we're able to manipulate the gut with anxiety and we can get them better, and sometimes we can't. And part of the problem is because they're tormented. They have either PTSD, they were traumatized at a young age. Their soul is not at ease, their brain is not at ease, so it sends out, messages to the microbiome that probably kills the microbiome. So in my opinion, it's a two-way highway. Your microbiome is damaged, it causes anxiety, but also if you're anxious spiritually, your microbiome gets messed up. So
that's true.
And you get anxiety. So I think believing in God, I think trusting God to say, I put myself in your hands, God, and I just trust you. I know you have a plan for me. That's the foundation of science to me. Believing that there is a scientist, call it God, call it divine intervention, that there's someone guiding all this. Nothing happens coincidentally. Something happens, and then you go, wow, it's a good thing that this happened before, because otherwise, look at me, thank God I had a genetic sequencing lab to look at the microbiome before and after fecal transplant in my Alzheimer patient. And then in the case that I did of cancer, where I did the metastatic mesothelioma case, thank God I opened the lab to understand the microbiome. Because if I didn't open the lab because I was too cheap, or I was like, oh my God, I'm going to spend millions on a lab and equipment, etc. If I didn't spend that, I would have never discovered COVID in the stools.
Right.
And I would have never discovered the importance of bifidobacteria. And I would never have been able to move forward at helping kids with autism. And I would have never been the voice of reason in a way. I'm not, people, it's a shame, because I find that on both sides, there's people have lost their ways.
Yes.
And the only way that should be is the way of, hey, I'm doing research and this is research, right?
Right.
Even when I do stool samples and everything, I tell everybody this is research. When we become, when we've become, revolutionary in a way, but then we start pushing another agenda, we lose the credibility of science.
Absolutely.
I think one of the reasons I'm probably being listened to on both sides of the politics, by the way, because I have patients on both sides of the politics, is because I try to remain humble and say, look, I may be full of it or I may know it. Either way, I'm still going to do the research. You can't stop me, because this is my path to understand the microbiome, to understand where do we go after we die. This is what I asked God when I was 5 years old. I'm like, where do we go after we die? And I thought medicine would tell me. And I kept asking people, like when they saw a light and when they were dying, near death experience, and it didn't really tell me. And then, this light bulb, microbes are important. They help absorb calcium. They help us absorb vitamin B. They help us be happy, be sad, be depressed. Microbes decompose our bodies and put us back into the ground. Microbes are important. Holy cow.
Right.
God put the secret of life in poop. Has a sense of humor is all I'm saying. So.
Well, and God doesn't make mistakes. And that's the thing. By definition, I was a bedside nurse face to face with COVID patients. I'm technically within the range at the time, overweight a little bit. I wasn't vaccinated. I wasn't vaccinated, all the things. And I was basically told, you're running a death sentence. You're eventually going to die. This is going to take you out. And I have never been more close to my faith than I was when I was working as a nurse during the pandemic. And what I saw rear its ugly head from people that I would give my life for, that I had worked for, that I had high respect and high regards for, completely turned vile and vicious because we didn't want to admit that there could be another side to this. And so, like you said, I genuinely think that's how I succeeded in not only not being sick and harmed or anything and coming out on the other end, but I had patients, I had families, I had friends, complete strangers praying over me to protect me and to continue to do the work, because I stayed in the system, and that was crucified. I was looked at as part of the problem, when really there were so many vulnerable people who needed someone, like you just said, on both sides, who could come in as a humble servant to be able to look at these people as human beings and care for them, regardless of whatever decision they made, whether they were vaccinated or not. We just wanted to make sure we did the oath to do no harm. And so I think it's extremely important that you point that out. And something that Dan and I live by is that none of this happens without the higher calling. And some of us are called in a different capacity. That is what you were called for. And people are being saved because of it. And we really, wanted to highlight that, because it's such an important topic that most people don't know about. They don't know the resources that they have out there, what they can do. And that was probably another question. I know we're kind of the time, I don't know what kind of time you have, but essentially, what simple things people could do to help maybe promote their gut.
Well, I will tell you, it's an interesting thing, because when the video that you showed, Dan, I was like a little bit on the overweight side. In fact, I've lost like 20 pounds since then. I think that, and I did that on purpose at the time, because I wanted to showcase I'm of a certain age, I'm overweight, not in the greatest shape, and yet I'm exposed to thousands of patients and still standing, right?
Amen.
So, and that was really the faith and trust in God. And by the way, thank God for all those people that prayed for me. Thank God for my network of people that love me and that were just continuously praying for me and recognized what I was doing and recognized the danger that I was putting myself in front of. What can people do? I think the number one thing is be healthy, lose weight if you're not happy, but if you're happy and healthy, do what you're doing, what you've always done. I'm a minimalist. If you want to feel healthier, eat less, move more, go to the sun, go enjoy the sun, because sun is your vitamin D. Go on a hike, go put your feet in the sand, in the soil, feel the earth, feel the energy. Listen to good music. We're doing some studies on the microbiome and frequency. And so listen to good music, good classical music, Beethoven, Vivaldi. Reset your gut again. If you're having a problem where you're having digestive issues, do fasting for 24 hours. Reset your gut. I think that's important. Good nutrition. Know your products. Okay. If a vitamin comes from like a factory that makes like billions of vitamins, the quality may not be the greatest, right? Go to the mom and pop shop, right? Don't go to the places that sell you massive amounts of beef and essentially, less is best. Know your farmer, support the local farms, get your local honey from the local farms, get your local milk from the local farm. Everywhere in America, there's a local farm somewhere. There's a person you trust making you bread, your sourdough bread. Trust that, get that, find a good yogurt that you like. If you tolerate it, it's going good in your belly, then it's probably good. Keep at it. Listen to your gut, listen to your symptoms without freaking out, without the fear, and seek a higher path. Do good. If you've been saved, if somebody saved you, pass it on. Help another person. Because I can tell you the biggest thing during the pandemic for me was really helping people and saving lives. And it felt good inside. And it felt good for the right reason, not because I was paid, but because, wow, I saved a kid. Wow, I'm able to have a kid speak. Wow. I was on Facebook the other day, and one of my patients who crashed, and I was literally holding his hand for 5 days because his oxygen was really low, and I was treating him. He thanked God that he was still alive. And then I said, I'm happy you're happy. And then he said, thank you, Dr. Hazan, for saving my life. I owe it all to you. And I said, pass it forward.
Amen.
Go help someone else. Okay. Because that's really what it's about. Okay. And forgiveness. Oh, by the way, forgiveness is healing. Okay. Stop keeping in you this hate. I see Democrats hating Republicans, Republicans hating Democrats, religions hating each other, races hating each other. Stop the hate. Embrace yourselves. Embrace your differences. Love your differences. Love that you can complement each other. We're all different. We're all different in our microbiomes, but I can assure you, if there's one group of microbes that gets killed, that human is dead. Okay. Right. Because it's all about, when you look at the microbiome and the whole picture, it's basically looking at all of humanity as a whole picture. You kill a group of microbes, that person who's housing that microbiome is going to start dying. You kill a race, whatever that race is, you've killed humanity, because that's the bigger picture. The bigger picture is we're all different. We're all beautiful. We all add something to the world. And it's not because I'm better, because I'm this person, but it's because I have some microbes in me probably that you don't have. And you have some microbes that I don't have. And therefore, uniting our brains together makes a better world. So that's forgiveness is, and I see there's so much anger with everything that happened, but we're not going to fix the problem if we don't forgive and move forward.
So
the anger.
Dr. Hazan, we call this medical ministry, and we're building a medical ark, is what we keep saying. And myself, fighting from this for the first 2 years, by March of 21, I was diagnosed early stages of Alzheimer's, CTE. I had multiple strokes. My microbiome was eviscerated. I could only do liquid for about 10 months until I learned how to rebuild my microbiome. I was put on the clock, told I had about 30 days to get my affairs in order. And I wasn't scared at all. Matter of fact, my profile picture was me smiling the day I was told that, because when death looked at me, I looked it back and said, bring it on, because it is what it is. Your work is so valuable and so important. And being inspiration through Christ and through God, and telling people the way, the truth, and life is the higher power. And when scientists start looking at the brain, and they see the trillions of sequences that happen, it has to be, it's perfection. And you go into creation. And that's why you were saying earlier, when scientists get that close to what they see and studying the human body, you have to believe in God.
You have to. Dr. Barodi, who was the father of fecal transplant, I remember calling him and I said, I'm looking at the microbiome. And he's like, what did you discover? I go, it's so complex. There's trillions of microbes and they're all working together to create a human. And I don't even know where to get my head, wrapped around it. And he goes, what else do you see? I said, I see God. Only God can do this. Think about how we all have different fingerprints, right? And we are all different, and different microbiome fingerprints, right? And we're all different. We're all different in our personalities. Even two twins are still different because they may be identical genetically, but in their microbiome, there are differences that make them different, that you could say, oh, this twin is twin A and this twin is twin B.
Right.
So everybody is different, and we have to embrace that. And we have to stop calling out people as crazy or this. Embrace the craziness, somebody said to me, oh my God, I'm crazy. And I said, well, isn't everybody a little bit crazy?
A little bit crazy.
Isn't that, humanity? Are we perfect? There's no perfect human out there. There's none.
But also to your point,
all them perfect. They're narcissistic. So.
Well, yeah, that's true too. But also to your point, a lot of times there's been so much division because of what happened during the pandemic. People are angry that some people didn't hold the line. They took the vaccine, they went along with the plan, nobody questioned it. There's all of this, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, this is not fair. And, or they're just completely trying to move on and basically say, what's done is done. But just like you're saying, if we cannot come to an agreement, if we cannot combine our communities, if we cannot make each other understand that even if it didn't affect you directly, it's going to at some point because of who you interact with. Maybe it's a family member, maybe, all these people that are injured that are being taken out of the workforce. Now you're going into your communities and you're not getting certain things met because now we've just wiped out an entire workforce. There's so many things that are happening. And what
it's also important to decrease the fear factor.
100%.
I think, as you build this arc of ministry, I think it's important to remind people to have faith over fear, because
yes,
I was not a fan of the whole fear factor of the virus to begin with. And I feel like, the other side is starting with the fear factor of the vaccine. And I think it's important to come together again and let it go, forgive, move on. Listen, the people that retracted my papers, I let it go. I said, stop retracting, come to the right path of the righteous. Help me discover, help me build instead of destroying. I think the more we forgive our perceived enemies, the better we are, the stronger we become.
Exactly.
And I know for me, that's been my strength, by the way. My strength has become from forgiving the people that hurt me the most.
Right.
Okay. And during the pandemic, there were people that hurt me the most. And I forgave them. And forgiving brings peace. Because otherwise you go into this path of like, oh my God, I'm going to go after him. I'm going to hire an attorney. I'm going to, crucify him. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then you go, and then what happens? What happens when you win the lawsuit? You've wasted years of your life that you could have been doing something better, right?
Right.
I think, again, forgiveness, decreasing the fear, faith over fear is so important.
So,
uniting the world, uniting and loving, love is the answer. Yes. Bring on the love.
That's how we move forward. If we don't come together, we're going to stay stagnant. More people are going to divide, and we're not going to be able to bring the wounded with us. And that's how it should be. We should be able to come together and bring our wounded together and be able to keep God in the forefront of this, because that's ultimately what keeps us moving on the path in the right direction. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
I have faith. I have faith. I think
Amen. Amen.
Sabine, after this conversation, if people know you believe in God, well, God bless them. But Senator Johnson, like you said, you trust him. You feel that he's truly trying to put a light on this darkness. And part of what I was saying early on after we testified, like we need to have because the American people and people around the globe don't trust scientists or doctors anymore because of what has happened. That we should have a civilian side of not only doctors, but advocates, different practitioners around the globe come together and work on a COVID accord kind of say where we do pilot programs, we have funding to get treatment to the patients, and we work together as Christians to do the right thing, because it's not about money either. Like we all went through it. When you talk about the death threats, I'm like, take a number. It's going around the corner.
I know. When I had death threats, I'm like, I think you need fecal transplant. You're missing microbe, dude.
Well,
so I'm like, and the other thing that was kind of crazy for me is like, yeah, step into my lab because I've got about 1,000 stool samples of COVID with different strains. Yes, threaten me. Why don't you threaten? Go, it's like playing with microbes.
Well, give me a good time.
And, it didn't help that they sent people home with nothing and told them to isolate. That's what they did to me. And so that alone, these things, but
what's so crazy. I'll tell you one thing that's crazy before you put the book. The thing, what ProgeniBiome started off was going to be a consumer lab, with stool testing and everything, but what it became really is a company of, that's hiring the righteous people, and it's trying to find money to bring those people because we saw them during the pandemic. David Wiseman, who is a brilliant scientist, used to work at Pfizer. He's genius. He needs to have a job. He needs to have a position where he can. I'm trying to bring him on right now because I want him to push to write the data, etc. I brought in a scientist that got fired because she didn't want to get vaccinated. I brought in other scientists that got fired because they didn't get vaccinated. I brought in, statisticians, interns, residents. I think it became kind of this oasis of people that were like-minded that just wanted to do the research. And I was so fortunate during the pandemic to work with so many brilliant minds that were righteous. And I think that's what I'm excited the most about is all these people. There are so many people out there and bringing them to a safe area, a safe place where they could imagine, innovate, create, ask questions. And that's what it should be. We've lost that in the academic centers. And I hope academic centers are hearing this and listening and bringing back innovations in medicine, bringing back doctors to be courageous, to be brave, to speak up. That's what we need right now.
Amen. And you are leading the way. Thank you. I mean, look, I said this to Nurse Nicole before we started. I said, most of our audience or people when we're speaking do not realize the type of people we bring on like you and how valuable your time is and how very few people could get into to see you. So this is amazing information that you're sharing. And obviously we were talking shit the whole time. So let's talk shit the book and get them to get you because you have such valuable knowledge that can help save millions of lives. Dr. Braun and I did an episode called Exodus 2 weeks ago because many are stuck in their desert trying to get to the land of milk and honey.
Yes, milk and honey.
Yeah, and the Bible is so full of wisdom. Good Lord, if they would just follow some of those foods. But let's talk shit. You can get it on Amazon. Look, everyone's getting stuff delivered. So pick up your book. It's only like $20, $29. It's not a lot.
It's actually $14. So,
yeah.
So, super cheap. Yeah.
All right. So thank you for sharing all this good information. And I got a feeling you're going to be a part of our Florida of team here to help be a solution to this darkness. The more people that can light up the darkness, my 2026 saying is be louder than light, because we need to light up the darkness to let them know we do not fear you. We are here to help God's people through this journey. And I'm so humbled that you came on to our podcast tonight. We're going to re-air it Wednesday. So if you would share it for us, because we are banned, shadow banned, all those fun things.
Send me that flyer. I'll put it on or put me as a collaborator.
Yes.
I will.
Much easier. All right.
Nicole, you got anything else to say for this amazing human being?
Listen, I just want to wrap it up by saying when our followers found out that you were going to be coming on, they had nothing but incredible things to say about you. You are very well known, very respected. People just wanted to basically, have us say how grateful they are for you for being brave, coming forward, and again continuing to fight. That Senator Ron Johnson hearing recently was just absolutely incredible. You were phenomenal, and we're just so grateful for people that are in this realm to be able to connect with us. And I always say our favorite phrase is Isaiah 6:8. And then the Lord said, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." And that's where we are. We want to make sure that we are coming in as frontline messengers to highlight really important people who are doing the right thing and standing out. And again, I just wanted to say thank you so much. You have been a blessing, and we can't wait to share this with everyone else.
And just for the last note, for our other advocates, Carolina, Heather Hudson, and Cody Hudson, can you give us a little update on that, Nurse Nicole? Do you know who Cody Hudson is, Sabine?
So she may know through possibly Twitter, but so Cody Hudson is a vaccine injury from COVID, and he's currently in a Tampa hospital right now. He was medevaced from Gainesville to basically get some additional treatment options. He's APS triple positive from the Pfizer vaccine. It's considered a terminal condition, and so raising awareness and making sure people understand that there are all sides with COVID and also the vaccine, and that these people are desperately seeking healthcare professionals and providers to recognize that they exist. And, could we have had more studies done to help these individuals? So he's currently stable in the hospital, has a long road ahead, but definitely super grateful to physicians like you who continue to highlight the importance of doing more research, putting it out there, transparency, and trying to get everyone on both sides to understand the importance of, coming back to medicine.
Absolutely.
Dr. Hazan, am I saying it wrong?
It's fine. It's fine.
Hazan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hazan, tomato.
Hazan? I want to get.
How did you get Hazan?
I don't know. Hazan. Well,
Yes.
I blame it on the multiple strokes and the old Alzheimer's. I always blew it on that. But thank you again. You are absolutely amazing human being. I'm so glad you agreed to come on, and I hope more of on your level come on too, because we're going to keep covering this. We're going to keep highlighting the frontline warriors that are followers of Jesus Christ and do not care if we tell a gazillion people, because that's the truth, the life, and the way. And he told us where to find our people, salt of the earth, and blessed are the peacemakers, right? So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Nurse Nicole, for being my sidekick in this battle on the front lines. And God, I'm so glad we had such an amazing warrior on tonight. God bless you guys.